All right, Chris, we're back for what is officially now called Political Fantasy Sports Pod. I like the new branding, actually. I think it's really what we're all about. And, for anyone who's just joining us for the first time, or if you've heard it before, you're going to hear it again. We are, or I am certainly provocatively moderate. That is the sense that you will get from me. And Chris, how would you describe yourself?
Either professionally cynical or cynically professional. I've done campaigns for 40 years. I've done, over 400 campaigns. And every time I say I've seen it all, I see something new. So I think professional cynic is pretty good.
I like it. It goes along with being provocative and moderate. I guess we should start with Hunter. I mean, I think there's actually way bigger stories out there, but what's your take on Hunter? Is it much ado about nothing, just like Trump, or do you think this is going to have an effect on Biden?
It matters.
Or on the election.
And that the kid is a hot mess is not news, I think. And the reason I think it matters is this. If you said to me in 2016 or 2020, Trump slept with a porn star, you would go, of course he did. Right? I mean, right? Yeah. If you say Joe Biden was involved with sleazy deals with his son, you would go, no, it's not true. And it's not so much that the gun charges, and he's going to have some tax problems, maybe in California, maybe not, depends if they can get rid of the case. But the entire Hunter Biden laptop story, which we know now was not only true, but it was the FBI had the laptop since 2019. And the reason it became a story is because of all the deals that Joe Biden was having with Hunter, and alleged deals and contiguous emails and notes that, the vice president at the time was showing up at meetings with, drug addicted son and his, Russian mob connected business partners. And that goes to Biden's character and judgment. And one of the things we talked about, I think 2 podcasts ago, was that voters move. Actually, when the Trump verdict, we talked about it. Voters move when they have new information that is contrary to what they already know. And again, Trump slept with a porn star. We should do an over/under if he slept with more than one porn star. I would, and honestly, I would take that over. I would take that over in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But Biden being unethical goes to the kind of the decent Joe thing. So it needs to play out. One of the things that we know about scandals is that scandals happen in slow motion. They explode in slow motion. A scandal happens, and then a week, a month, 2 months later, you get the reaction to it because people want to process it. People want to think, is this bullshit? Is this not bullshit? And also, how relevant is this to my choice? And, it's a problem. How big a problem it is remains to be seen.
So I have 2 questions. One is on the political side. Is this new information, considering that the laptop and the story's been out for a couple of years now? And did people already make up their mind about, he was definitely guilty or not? Does it move the needle on the new information front? I think, for instance, the new information front, when, Comey came out 2 weeks before the election and said, we're reopening the case into Hillary Clinton. It's like, boom, that's new information.
Yeah.
But was the previous case where they're like, we're looking at her emails. Okay, well, that was such a long period of time. People could already make up their mind about it. She was either going to be lock her up or she wasn't guilty. Right. And, so from the political side, that's my question. From a constituent side, from a voter's perspective, who is maybe provocatively moderate, I guess, is something I'm leaning into. To me, this is a lot like Whitewater, where people said there's all these shady business dealings and we have to investigate them. So there was an investigation, and you didn't find shady business dealings in Whitewater. Was it Whitewater? Wasn't that
the Texas, the real estate deal?
Yeah. Ken Starr instead finds out that Bill Clinton likes to get BJs from his interns. Okay. That's new information, and you can judge the man or you can judge the president based on that information. But it's the same thing with this, is that they said Joe Biden is the mafia don of a Biden crime family. And what we learned was all you came up with was that his drug addicted son broke federal laws by acquiring a handgun while being a drug addict. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, the original there was like, it's a much bigger thing, and then it turns out it's really just a drug addict getting a gun.
Well, I mean, the reason it's not no, and I think if you believed Hillary was unethical, that's an easy belief. If you believe Bill was unethical, it's an easy belief. If you believe Trump is unethical, it's an easy belief. But Biden ran on being the ethical, I'm going to return standards and avuncular grandfather for 7 of the 8 grandchildren, Joe. Which, by the way, I think that really hurts him too. I
think that's worse.
Yeah, but I think that the only reason that the first part of the crime, the laptop crime, wasn't charged is because Department of Justice dragged their feet and statute of limitations ran out on it. I mean, that's the whole kind of testimony of the IRS whistleblowers, and now it appears everything they've said has been true. And it's just a lot of good stuff for a guy who's trying to say this election is about decency. If the election is about the economy, if the election is about abortion, if the election is about IVF, that plays on Biden's turf.
Right.
If he's trying to say this election is about decency and you are displaying, like the granddaughter, fundamentally what normies would consider indecent behavior.
Right.
That's fucking bad. Because if you're saying, because it goes to we've talked about this a couple times too, that if a politician tells you 3 things and the first one is false, you don't believe the other 2. And if you're Biden trying to connect some policy together, it is a very difficult. It's stupid. But it's also trying to get some poor bastard, Jeff Pollock, who I've worked on campaigns with, who's one of Biden's pollsters, is going to have this talk where he's going to have to go into this meeting, and he's going to say, Mr. President, you got to stop talking about decency because people don't think you're decent. Wow, what do you mean? And you're going to have that whole kind of thing. And campaigns that can embrace who they are. I famously worked for Al D'Amato, and we never said he's honest. I worked with Arlen Specter. We never said that he's apolitical. He's, right? We could say that he does this. Everybody knew he voted this way and he voted that way and he flip-flopped it. And that was okay because that was baked in. And so being true to who you are, voters will respect that. Voters won't respect you trying to bullshit them.
Right.
I don't know if it's gotten there yet. I don't know if it's gotten there yet. But boy, oh boy, it just professionally, it feels dangerously close. And again, it's not, I mean, it's not the gun charges. It's not, it's not that he lied on a gun form and, and he was so strung out that he got the wife of the dead brother he was banging to throw it near a schoolyard and then blame it on Mexican immigrants. I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, who came up with that thing? That's kind of not it. It's that, like, is this like, a family of freakazoids, or is it the all-American family that we've been sold? with a kid that has
Well,
problems. And
yeah, and as somebody who I try to be a rational person, I know that there is no all American family. We're all a bunch of fucking freakazoids. So I just think like if you try to elevate yourself and make it seem like you're better than everybody else, and that to your point, I am going to restore dignity. No, man, you are that chronic corruption who's been a fucking senator for 40 years and a vice president, now a president. You're no different than everybody else.
yeah,
That's chronically corrupt. You are different than the acutely corrupt that we've talked about
right,
before.
right,
What I think, actually, personally, I will say this. I'm glad he was convicted if he was guilty, and he was sentenced to be guilty by a jury of his peers. I think we have made, what's interesting to me is the different perspective in the media on both sides, where the trial against Trump is fair, but the trial against Biden is unfair, or the trial against Biden is fair, but no, man, I'm glad that all of these fucking people who have been able to, I think it's a step forward as a country where powerful people are being held account, where poor people never had a chance before anyway. If you weren't Biden and you were accused of this, you would have already been in prison for a long, you know what I mean? He probably won't even go to prison. So I'm all for it. He's guilty. Punish him. You know,
and I think that's where most people kind of fall. And
yeah,
and with power becomes privilege, is that we all have had a good friend or a relative that's been had an addiction problem, but we probably haven't had one whose father got him a commission in the Navy and got him out of the Navy when he was doing drugs on board a ship at sea, and then got him, despite how unqualified, a bunch of like $1 million gigs with foreign nationals. I mean, and that's the piece of it that the average person goes, you know what? No, fuck you. You did a crime. You're not going to skate. And the same thing with Trump. I mean,
totally.
The fact that the jury was out that long, maybe they were getting free lunch because it was like, did you pay off a porn star? Of course you did.
Right. Right. Yeah. And personally, that's really the only question I have. Now, politically motivated or not, I think both of those cases had political motivation in them.
Yep.
I don't really give a shit necessarily, because there is a prosecutorial discretion of what cases they bring. People get away with crimes all day, every day. And I think on both sides, they've been getting by with a shit ton for a long time. So the fact that a prosecutor on each side finally was like, well, fuck it, let's go find the case. My opinion is like, are you guilty of the crime? Yes. Well, then you do the time. Other people who don't have your means have had to deal with that. So like, screw you.
That's where most people fall. And I think that the only difference between the two cases is one case confirms who Donald Trump is.
Right.
The other case is kind of a new perspective on, maybe a new perspective on Joe Biden. By the way, the other piece of that is that, only politicians think that voters love them and voters think they're honest. The average person goes, politician crook.
Yeah.
Right. So this might not be particular big news, to voters, and it also may not matter in the long run. I think it probably matters a little bit. But
all these little bits are adding up against Joe Biden, though, if you've noticed, Chris. Like, there's a bunch of little bits that are adding up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And again, I think his biggest problem is that, he appears out of it most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, there was was it a church thing down in Georgia?
Was that where the guy yelled at him or whatever and walked?
No, this was they were all dancing. Like the vice president was there, and a bunch of people were there, and it was like music and
Oh, and he was just like staring straight ahead or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was doing that like
the Mitch McConnell.
Yeah, and like you ate the entire edible and it kicked in, and your boys bring you to the club, and you're just sitting there, and you're like, ah. I mean, that was that look. I mean, everybody knows that look.
For sure.
That was the I'm stoned out of my mind, help me look.
Well, it's interesting. So this is actually a good little transition for us, because there are a couple things that I think really matter, and how voters view those things is going to depend which way I think they vote. So you brought up abortion. Let's touch on the abortion pill ruling by the Supreme Court. Unanimous decision to not remove mifepristone or whatever it's called, the abortion pill, from the market. Regardless of what whether anybody agrees or disagrees with that decision, what are the political ramifications of it now? Does it ease some of the state pressure, some of the pressure against Republicans, because it takes away some of the argument that there's a slope that's happening now towards complete Handmaid's Tale? You know what I mean? It's like, well, no, there is a check and balance here. There is some balance.
I think I'm going to say no, and here's why. Because, for better or worse, and we've talked about this before, even, RBG thought Roe was a terrible decision, but she would let it stand. So but I think that once that box is open, Pandora's box is open, you deal with the locusts and the frogs and the plagues that come out of it. But the reason I don't think it goes away is because yesterday the Southern Baptist Conference voted overwhelmingly to ban in vitro. Not that they have any fucking power, but I mean, as a theatricality,
it's part of the culture war.
Yeah, and they voted to ban that. And and if you were a Southern Baptist, I know a lot of them who have had some, one family in particular had in vitro, and I haven't talked to him about it. But you got to go out of your fucking mind that my kid is now unchristian and unclean, or maybe not that far, but my kid is problematic because we couldn't, and so no. And by the way, and I do think it's a good thing in the long term, because it is a protracted and extended discussion on cultural values in America that we should have had, as opposed to the courts deciding Roe. So, and again, I think it's uncomfortable, it's terrible, and careers will be ruined and careers will be made on it. But I think ultimately we're going to come out on the other side like Western Europe. We're going to have some kind of 7 to 20, depending on the state, abortion ruling. And, I mean, like in Kansas, I mean, if you can't pass an abortion law in Kansas, where exactly are you going to pass it? And again, the Kansas vote last year, the referendum, it wasn't like abortion on demand or any of that. It wasn't anything fucking crazy. It simply said, no, we want this right, and we take it seriously.
I think that would be,
that was literally the kind of the why people were voting against it. That
I think that's how I would defend the argument almost always, is that I've lived in many different states, and when people talk about, Democrats want to be able to want abortion up until even after birth. I'm like, you do realize that that's not abortion, that's fucking murder. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Even the craziest people I've ever talked to for abortion have never gone as far as the fucking fever dream imagination of the people who are anti-abortion of what they think they want it to be.
Yeah, and the kind of the progressive wing doesn't do themselves any favor when, like, there was a Hollywood event, I guess 4 years ago, about describe your first abortion, and Lena Dunham is talking about her abortion. And and my progressive friends, my Democrat consultant friends want to take them and fucking strangle them by the neck because it's, because they are, semi-celebrities or pseudo-celebrities or whatever the heck they are. And they're on TV and they're saying stuff. And if you're watching, you go, oh, LA, California, abortion. They're
Right.
And again, but I think the Kansas thing is a really good bellwether that people are sensible and, they want it as a right, but they want it as a right, and they will take it seriously.
This is what scares me.
And they're willing to make uncomfortable, close calls.
this is what scares me a little bit about it, Chris, is that so Kansas is interesting. In some of the other states, Florida now, there's state constitutional amendments that are being voted on. Shy of that, however, if you look at national polling on topics, there's an overwhelming national agreement among the citizens of this country for some form of a universal basic health insurance, some common sense gun control laws, some common sense crime laws that the majority of people don't want criminals to go free, whatever, right? So the people of the country actually have common sense. But if you look at those, with the will of the people, once it gets to legislation, it never happens. And I think that you're the cynic, but I'm going to be cynical. I think it's because the way our system is run right now, actually the border's a prime example. It is better not to solve problems. It's better to run on problems than to run on the solutions you've provided. Mm-hmm. It's better to, you're going to flip-flop control of the levers of power, but when you're out of power, you don't want anything to be successful, and you can hold it against the other side for you to come into power. And then the minority party, because we're so evenly divided, the minority party can hold up any progress and they don't have to negotiate common sense solutions. You just hold it against them and pound them. They're problems. So in theory, I agree with you that abortion will have to be resolved legislatively as the will of the people, but I don't have any confidence in the way I've seen the solutions being resolved that that's possible in our current environment. How do you see that being possible? Other than constitutional amendments.
Now, I'm the non-cynical one. Yeah, and I think amendments are a fucking terrible idea because they're hard to do and they're hard to undo. But I mean, no matter what kind of system of democracy you're going to go to, I mean, if you follow what's going on in France right now, it's a total shit show and hysterical.
Yeah.
That the ruling party loses a bunch of elections. They hold a snap election right after D-Day, which was really smart, I think.
Yeah.
Because it was very, I mean, if you saw the D-Day thing, the president of France was the middle of it, man. He was, out there singing La Marseillaise, and it was great. And now the opposition parties have both splintered, and they fired people, and some guy's locking himself in his office, and it comes out that, the second in command was his mistress. I mean, it's crazy shit. And
it's insane.
And the Tory party, which had a lock on British politics for, 15 years, mm-hmm. is like pouring gasoline on itself and lighting itself on fire. Mm-hmm. And so, but you got to let it work out. I mean, it's all messy. And I've seen enough good progress to be okay with it all.
Okay.
What I'm very leery of is judicial edicts and executive orders. I mean,
I don't disagree with you, but I don't.
And again, I mean, the borders are a really good example. It's that there are underlying tensions that make it not a solvable thing. And if you solve it to where most people want it solved, they ain't going to be happy. People aren't going to be happy about
it. I agree in theory, again, in principle on everything that you said. I've never understood, though, the argument about, like, the role of the Supreme Court is to determine the constitutionality of laws. So if the law in a state says that you can't get an abortion, and justices in that case is fought, a woman is punished for getting an abortion, let's say, and she appeals, and it goes all the way through the process and gets to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says, well, let's say the Fourth Amendment is the right to privacy, basically, that people should be secure in their papers and stuff like that, right?
Right.
So if the jurists say this rule of privacy, if it doesn't involve a person's health, then what the fuck does it include? People should have a right to the privacy of their own health. People shouldn't know anything about what you and your doctor discuss. that seems to me to be a common sense application of what their role is to take the Constitution and interpret it based on law. Now, whether or not that means all abortion is legal, that's a very maybe different thing. But to be able to say no state has the right to criminalize a private health action, I don't see how I don't see how that is a bridge too far for what the role of the Supreme Court is.
Yeah, I mean I lost you a little bit on that, and I'm not sure if you're talking about Roe or the latest one.
No, an example of what Roe, without the details of Roe, just the example of if you're going to appeal everything to the Supreme Court and then they apply the rights of privacy to your health decisions as a woman, isn't that kind of their specific role?
No, that's and you would be hard pressed to find a legal scholar to say that's what that health was set up as anything in the Fourth Amendment. And again, I mean, even people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what's his name, Miller, Harvard law professor. God, I can't think of his name. I interviewed him years ago. Arthur Miller, thank you. And, basically, they would say like Roe was a joke of a case, not a joke of a case. It was a terrible decision, and the logic of it that the court deciding, essentially we can't we don't know where life begins, but we're going to say it begins in the third trimester. And the whole decision's kind of a hot mess. But it solved a political problem that the politicians don't want. And again, I think that, in states that if a state or a legislature is going to restrict abortion, that, voters will go punish them. And we've seen, it's very easy on the state rep level to say, fuck these people. It happened in Pennsylvania a couple of years ago, and they voted for themselves like pay raises and perks and some other crap, and like literally like a third of the legislature got swept out in the next election, and nobody saw it coming. And I think you're going to see stuff like that. You're going to see angry women. You're going to see angry, even moderates. You're going to see whatever that contingency of the. I mean, let's watch how many participants the Southern Baptists lose in the next 6 months. My guess is you're going to find a lot of Methodists and Unitarians all of a sudden. But
well, it's funny that you bring up the
again.
No, sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say it's funny. It's funny that you bring up the pay raise. Did you see that Congress is now they want to do a pay raise after a 15-year freeze? Did you see? I just saw it today on X or Twitter or whatever. They've said that they're going to do a pay raise because they're unable to recruit diverse candidates. Is their rationale behind it, or at least that's their PR rationale.
And voters are going to say, "Fuck these people." Having said that, the reality is that I've had clients who were members of Congress who went from being, partners in law firms who were, sleeping 4 dudes in a 2-bedroom apartment. And, because housing is scarce and expensive down there. And if you are middle class or working class, you have zero chance of being able to afford Washington, D.C. and that lifestyle as a congressman. So I'm kind of sympathetic to that plight. On the other hand, fuck them. Zero sympathy.
I mean, yeah, for real though, like, don't live in fucking DC then. Go live in Bowie, Maryland and commute. Do you know what I mean? Like, what? Yeah, who the fuck do you think you are? You deserve a brownstone in Georgetown? And get out of here. You're just a congressman from some district. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, or better yet, I went on the hill within walking distance of the office, right?
Yeah.
And again, you're going to get zero sympathy from anybody for that.
Totally.
And again, I get the counter argument. Oh, it's only going to be millionaires. Well, who do you think's there now? You know,
Listen, it's not
right?
even true. Even if you go in as a poor bum, you come out as a millionaire because of the chronic corruption.
Right.
So what do you mean? Get out of here. Actually, this is a really good tie-in as well. I saw about Lauren Boebert. We have the Colorado primary contest up right now. So I was doing a little bit of research on her. Her ex-husband, or whatever he is now, prior to her being in Congress, I think his last salary was like 45 grand or something like that, 50 grand or something. After her election, he got a $450,000 a year gig from one of the biggest companies in her district. So,
Yeah.
and we're supposed to think you need a fucking pay rate and all of your insider trading. So, yeah,
What a coincidence! He got the job, right?
yeah, he was overqualified apparently. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I don't know. It's
Which and that goes to the kind of Hunter Biden thing and why it's kind of toxic for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
You can't be Joe from Scranton, you know, if you're, you know, let's kindly say unaccomplished kid is now being an advisor on energy policy in fucking Russia.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
What?
Totally.
You know, if it's scoring crack or knocking up strippers, I'm hiring him in a minute because he's
right
qualified. But
right, if he got a job with the Sinaloa cartel, that would make sense. But with Ukraine,
I would say, yeah, okay, right. Leave him alone. Yeah, he's you know
he's highly qualified.
But I mean, yeah, but the stuff like Boebert's husband, it's like voters go, please fucking stop. You know.
Yeah.
And again, there might be a case, but too bad. You have a lot of choices in life, and nobody is entitled to be a member of the U.S. Congress. So
totally.
You know?
And what it's funny because I've argued with people before. People are like, we need term limits. We need term limits. We need term limits. And I said, these people are fucking greedy enough as it is. Could you imagine if they only had 2 or 3 terms? It would be a run for the door with as much money as they could take out as quickly as possible. At least without term limits, they have the idea that, oh, I can be here for a long time. I don't need to steal all of the money. But if you give them only a short window to get as rich as possible, they're going to milk that as much as possible. So, and the truth is, these idiots, most of them, I don't think they could ever do a different job. You could not go work in any corporation in the world and bring the way they operate, what they're responsible for, into that corporation and keep your job. It just wouldn't fly. You'd be in a meeting talking about something completely off topic, trying to score points. They'd be like, get out of the meeting, man. You're wasting time. You know what I mean?
Speaking of which, the nexus between big companies and politicians. The former president of Nike died yesterday or 2 days ago. A
the
guy
co-founder?
named
The co-founder dude, Phil. Phil Knight.
No, Neil Goldschmidt. Neil Goldschmidt was one of the youngest mayors in the country of Portland, and then he was a well thought of. Then he became president of Nike, and then he became governor of Oregon, and he was raping a young girl the entire time.
Oh shit!
It's worth reading the obituary. So, but he was like one of the he was a member of Jimmy Carter's cabinet. He was I forget what, but he was like kind of one of the rising stars of the Democratic Party. And the lead to the obituary is kind of shocking. Anyway, it came out.
Larry Miller, right?
WM, is it?
What was his name?
Neil Goldschmidt is the guy's name. Is the
Oh, okay. Neil Goldschmidt. Obit. Okay, sorry. I'm excited to read this obituary.
Yeah, he was raping. She was either 13 or 14 when it started.
What the fuck is? Okay.
Yeah, and and he was kind of this kind of shiny, oh, he could be the first Jewish president kind of thing. He's this greatest guy, and he's such a Nike, and he understands everything. Anyway, so he runs for governor. He wins a very close race, and he's governor for 4 years, and he does not run for re-election, which kind of shocks everybody. And he becomes like the biggest lobbyist in the state, and making bank like nobody's business. There comes to be a contentious piece of legislation that he's trying to lobby through, and they're trying to figure out what they can do to stop it. And somebody says, well, he had an affair with this girl, and I think she was underage. And it turns out that not only did that happen, but they paid her off, and for a piddling amount of money, for like $350,000. The woman had all kinds of psychological and physical problems, and died. I think it's unclear how she died. It looks like it's a suicide or addiction. She died at 40.
Was it a Boeing suicide?
No, it was just she died in Vegas, and it looked like it was a leaving Las Vegas kind of scenario. But she was
from all the psychological trauma.
Yeah, I mean, she was being raped by the fucking governor of the state.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, I mean, and again, may he rot in hell a very long time.
Yeah.
But it was interesting is that he was also this kind of in this business world, and his image was one thing, the reality of him was another. But what I always thought was kind of fascinating about it is that only because there was a piece of legislation that people wanted blocked did some politician finally say, I think he's fucking young girls.
Right.
Not like, which means, when Jim McGreevey was governor of New Jersey, and he came out that he was gay, and he resigned. And it became a big thing. Oh, he had to resign because he was gay and blah, blah, blah. No, I mean, he resigned because they were going to be all indicted, and this was kind of part of the deal. And
interesting.
And the idea that like, and all these politicians in New Jersey going, I had no idea Jim McGreevey was gay, and it was just like, and what are you fucking like? Everybody knew he was gay, right. And it's like I remember reading one in the paper, somebody saying, "Oh, I don't know, but." Nobody had any idea. And like that politician was a guy that had told me a Jim McGreevey gay joke. I mean, and again,
just like Lindsey Graham is a man about town. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right. But everybody knew he was gay and nobody cared.
Right.
And the press kind of went on this weird thing. Oh, he had to resign because he was gay, and then he even wrote a book about how he had to resign because he was gay. It was like, what are you fucking nuts?
What a fucking.
But everybody knew. But everybody knew and kept quiet, which frankly they should have, because that's his business.
Yeah.
If he wants to parade around with his beard of a wife,
whatever. Yeah.
By the way, but the kicker, McGreevey was such a slime ball. He finally decides to. His wife divorces him, and McGreevey's lover is some mega rich guy. And McGreevey says, I'm becoming a priest and taking a vow of poverty, so I don't have any money, so I can't pay you any alimony.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
But going back to the Dolchman thing,
Jesus Christ.
Which he's really a despicable guy, but I think the other despicable thing that's kind of buried in the article and not mentioned is that obviously people knew and didn't do anything about this young girl.
Well, did the guy go to prison for the crime?
No, the at that time the statute of limitations had run out.
Oh my God. Okay, so my belief is, I don't know if you've ever read any Greek tragedies, but it's kind of a theme throughout that if you were like a man and you were dishonored in some way, the king, and this is definitely part of the storyline of, I think, Ajax and also maybe Persephone or whatever the other story is. But you were not allowed to do a burial for that man, right? And I think it's not Ajax, but there's one
Ajax.
where his sister buries him. Is it Ajax where his sister buries him?
I think it's Ajax. It's Ajax.
And so that's how I feel about this fucking scumbag, is like, if there is a Jewish cemetery anywhere that lets him sit in some sort of hollowed, he should just be put aside on the side of the road to decompose with the rest of the fucking animals. Anyway.
Yeah. By the way, what's really interesting about it too is that there was another Carter cabinet member, a guy named Brock Adams, not in Oregon, but stayed above in Washington State, who was systematically drugging and raping women for years. And he finally got caught in 92. And you know, and they used to refer to it as his name's Brock Adams. He's dead. They used to refer to it as Brock's problem. Not like I'm a fucking rapist criminal. It's his problem. We just have to, like, you don't want to. And basically, it was kind of an interesting story because he was drugging women. One of his big fundraisers was a woman.
Yeah.
And she shows up and she says, a Democrat, she says, this guy raped me. And her father was a big fundraiser as well. And she charged, and the police investigated, and they couldn't come up with the evidence because there was a time lapse, but because one of the things that the way Senator Brock Adams, cabinet member, Governor Brock Adams, was drugging women was with chloral hydrate. And chloral hydrate, if you go back to old detective fiction, no. Chloral hydrate is what they used to call a Mickey Finn. And you mix it with alcohol. So if you ever read like old detective novels and sometimes on like old Humphrey Bogart movies, they'll say slip him a Mickey Finn. And a Mickey Finn was alcohol combined with chloral hydrate. And you know, it knocks you out. But it is a substance that was not tested for. It wasn't part of a standard drug test. So he could get away with it. So it was that kind of calculating. But
they did eventually catch him.
Women. Well, here's the thing: they caught him. He came out. He was running for re-election. I was doing the race against him, by the way. And it came out, and it was an incredible front page story. It was back in '92. So I remember like 3 a.m. when the paper broke, like my fax machine's going off. Like I got a call, and they were like, "Go to your office, start looking at this." And it was front page news, and he did not even resign from Congress, from the Senate. Mitchell, who was the Senate Majority Leader, who has gotten the Philadelphia Medal of Honor, and he was also, honored. He was the Senate Majority Leader at the time. I want to say Bill Mitchell. It's not Bill Mitchell. It's but anyway, he was also on all the logs to Epstein's Island, and he's had no comment. He was Senate Majority Leader, and they were like, "Well, poor Brock. We're gonna not kick him out of the fucking U.S. Senate for raping and drugging women. We're just gonna knock him off a committee." And he finished out his career as a U.S. Senator and became a lobbyist and became very wealthy.
What the fuck?
He died a few years ago. But so, and again, there were 2 cases that people knew unambiguously what was going on, and they decided to look the other way.
Okay, so this is all building up. I love where this is all going. So far we have congressional pay increase, the potential for abortion, and now we have a bunch of pedophile rapists that are staying in Congress and only having their misdeeds revealed when it's politically expedient. Have you seen the report that Saudi Arabia is not going to renew the 50-year petrodollar deal?
No. No, I
Yeah,
didn't see that.
so it's on Twitter right now. They're not going to do it. So I don't know what they will do, what will come next, but they are not. I guess it ended June something, a week ago maybe, and they said they're not going to renew it. Let me ask you a question. Do you think they aren't renewing it for geopolitical reasons or for economic reasons, or both, if you want to split the difference?
I think economic reasons, because they're, I think economic reasons that geopolitical reasons have been calculated on.
Okay.
Because the Saudis first and foremost are about the money. One of the things that they're doing is, have we talked about NEOM? NEOM?
No, I don't think so.
NEOM is the Saudi super city.
The line?
Huh?
The thing that they're talking about called the line? It's going to be like miles long in the middle of the desert?
Yeah.
Oh, what's it called? NEOM?
Yeah, NEOM.
Oh, yeah, it's like new something or, yeah.
But what it is, we talk about, climate change and greenhouse gases. No. Well, actually, NEOM is solving that because they've got the world's biggest desalination plant in the Dead Sea. And essentially they are making fusion energy on demand. So you have a auto hot water heater, you turn it on, it works. What they're doing is that it's all powered by 100% renewable by seawater. And literally you turn on a light and it kind of happens that minute. And it is, and right now NEOM is also supposed to, allegedly it's going to be its own, it's going to have Western Euro style laws and not Islamic law. But it's the kind of the city of the future kind of thing. But that is all economic. So the Saudis are hedging their bets and spending hundreds of billions of dollars to develop alternative fuel. So I think the Saudis are all about the money and how they kind of come out on top.
It's interesting. When I read the thing about I saw it called The Line. I see here it's called, it is, they call it The Line, NEOM made to change. When I read about it, I thought to myself, this looks like a fucking prison colony, because you're really not meant to ever leave inside this structure. So and it's in the middle of the desert is where they want to build it. So to me, it sounds like a prison colony where they're going to convince a bunch of middle-class schlubs, oh yeah, come move here. And they're probably going to be workers. And the rich people are going to be able to live in our natural environment. And all the workers, have you ever seen, I think it's from the 30s, maybe even the 20s, and they redid it, called Metropolis, with the people that live below. It's a silent film. Yeah. To me, that was exactly what came to my mind, is that this whole climate change shit, people are going to be like, what do you mean? You don't believe it's real? The climate is always changing, first of all. But all of this, I believe, when I saw that come out, I was like, oh my God, the conspiracy theorists must be right, because they're now saying, oh, climate change, you're going to live in this beautiful thing, and it's going to be miles long, and it's all enclosed. And I looked at the outside pictures of the rendition. It's surrounded by desert. I just thought it was a penal colony. They're convincing you that you're living in heaven, but they're really putting you in hell.
Can I tell you a quick Fritz Lang story? A quick Metropolis story?
Yeah.
The director of Metropolis was a guy named Fritz Lang, who was brilliant, a genius, and if you haven't seen Metropolis, it's fucking awesome. In the 80s, they did one with a rock and roll score, which was terrible. But anyway, you watch. Goebbels saw Metropolis and went to Lang and said, we want you to do our propaganda films. We want you to be the Nazi propaganda guy. And this was a little later. And this is, I think Metropolis was 27 or 28. So the Nazis were just kind of getting a foothold into power. And Lang is like, oh, that's really great. That's really terrific. I'm really honored for that. We're fucking moving. And they wound up going to the United States, where he did a bunch of really interesting kind of film noir things, never to the success he had in Germany, but was kind of a revered character.
Mm.
The cameraman for Metropolis was a guy named Carl Freund, who wound up being the first cameraman for I Love Lucy in the 50s.
Oh.
And Carl Freund actually created the multi-camera grammar that we see in sitcoms today.
Oh, that's
because
crazy.
They shot it a certain way, and they shot it multiple cameras, because it used to be one. They used to shoot it film style, but he was shooting this multiple camera thing, and the always problem was, how do you light it so shadows don't fall? And Carl figured it out, and he was Fritz Lang's. So I Love Lucy, to the Nazis, to Metropolis. Right?
Yeah, I feel like you are underappreciated in your time, my friend. You know,
right? Yeah.
Okay, so petrodollar.
I can have this conversation here. I have a dinner and people go, "Are you out of your fucking mind? What's the matter with you?" Right? How do you know this?
Okay, so petrodollar. Last thing is the. Did you see the Massey, the North Carolina the Kentucky Thomas Massey, his comments on Tucker about his the AIPAC babysitters for the Republicans?
No.
So he said, this is what he said. He said, and the lead-in basically is that Massey, you know, he's voted against funding for Israeli arms. He's voted against funding for Ukrainian arms. He's kind of against that kind of spending.
Yeah.
But he's also been, I think, very critical, especially within his party, of the influence of AIPAC in American politics. And he's taken a lot of flack from AIPAC. And he said, so one of the questions was about that. And he said, well, I've had members come up to me and say, it's really unfair the way they're treating you. I'll talk to my AIPAC guy and see if they can tone it down. He also said, people have come up to him and said, you're not wrong. I wish I could vote with you, but my AIPAC guy, they just won't let it. They just, I can't do it. I'm going to take flack back home, my AIPAC guy. And Tucker Carlson says, what's an AIPAC guy? And Massey says, it's a person from your district who is connected with AIPAC, and they're your babysitter. They have your phone number in there. They have your direct cell phone number, and they make sure that you're towing the line. And they raise money for you, or they raise money for your opponent if you don't toe the line. And he said, that's how, and Tucker says, is this everyone in Congress? And Massey says, I don't know how it works with the Democrats, but it's all of the Republicans. As far as I know, I'm the only one that doesn't have one. And if you look at like the interview between Massey and Tucker, you'll see this exchange. So this is interesting because this story, I think, if you look at it through the lens of just kind of school, protests and Gaza, Hamas, Israel, it's one thing. You start to look at it through the lens of like the petrodollar, and that's why I put it in today, is like there is a perception, I think, among Americans that we are, for all the belief that we are in control of things internationally, it's starting to feel like other countries are actually controlling our levers of power. Whether it's Republicans saying Ukraine was telling Joe Biden what to do through his son, or China, they worked with China somehow, I don't know all the details, or Trump is part of a Russian influencing thing, and now people are saying AIPAC is controlling, and it's the only country in the world where this happens. No other country has a lobby in the U.S. that does this. With the petrodollar splitting and stuff like that, it seems that we are kind of being sold off in bits and pieces to the general public. And I guess what my question is, what's your take on A, the specific aspect of what Massey said, and B, what I'm saying in the mind of the average voter, maybe not the average voter, the voter who's a little bit more agitated with the way the U.S. world is working right now. The U.S. is working right now.
I'm going to reference, since we're doing movies, I'm going to reference two movies. Massey is like the character in Casablanca, where he says, "I'm shocked to find out there's gambling going on in the back room." And I mean, that's how lobbyists work. You know, you can, and you know, what was interesting is the AIPAC decision to go after Massey in a primary, which was really stupid because, you know, Massey isn't anti-Israel per se. He's anti every foreign policy, and he's voted against every friggin' budget, and like that's just who he is. And
he's an isolationist.
Exactly. And you know, he's an isolationist and a gadfly. And you know, I think they dropped like 700, 800 grand against him, and they were never going to beat him. But it's just like, you know, let's get a stick and like let's poke that hornet's nest and see what happens. So that's really stupid. That's how Congress works. You find, you know, we used to call them affinity groups. You find somebody whose policies you want to support, you can support, and you say, "Hey, I supported you. Can you raise me money?" And it becomes that. And you know, and AIPAC is a very strong lobbying effort, not the strongest, but they have a very strong lobbying effort on the Hill. So this is business as usual and has been forever. The second piece about selling off the country, go back and watch the movie Network.
I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Right. And the central plot line of Network is the Arabs. This is 1970s. Is the Arabs buying U.S. corporations and businesses and real estate, and that's what the central thing is, and that's why all the bad stuff has to happen. But Network feels like a documentary now, but it's really worthwhile about like crazy balkanization of media types, and that you know, they will do absolutely anything for ratings, and but so in a lot of ways, you know, it's two old movies I think address both of those nicely.
I can't think of is it Faye Dunaway that's in that, right?
Yeah, she won an Academy Award.
Yeah, Patty Chayefsky, who wrote it, was a TV writer, back to your reference to I Love Lucy, and then he wrote the movie.
Chayefsky wrote one of the most brutal things ever, or actually, he wrote a bunch of brutal things, but I mean, he's an incredible writer who is cynical and, you know, he
was funny. Like that, it's a funny movie.
Chayefsky was, you know, one of the flowers of that post-war, like, liberal humanist arts movement, which is kind of where my sensibilities are. That basically they feel that like we're all fucked, but that doesn't absolve us from trying not to be fucked. And if you look at it, it's pretty funny.
Okay. Yeah, no, for sure. The Divine Comedy. All right. The last thing I would say to tie this all together, I think it went beautifully. The way we started, new information, voters, Trump, Biden, this is what I think. We laid out so many different things that piss Americans off. You're giving yourself pay raises, all of these things, potentially the American dollar order being shaken up. There's going to be a lot. The way all of these things added, and you added in politicians who are pedophiles that are getting away with it and shit like that. Which candidate embodies the American people's desire to say, fuck you, fix this shit more? And I think that's who's going to win this election. And I think it because, not just because I can feel it, but in Reddit, under the conservative Reddit, I read a guy say, liberals think we like Trump. We don't. But he's the only one who's an asshole enough to break it all and then it fix it. And he went so far as or I think it was a he, but could have been a she. They went so far as to say, will he declare retribution through the DOJ? Probably, but then that's going to force Congress to make some laws limiting the power of what the DOJ can do, isn't it? And I was like, shit, that's actually kind of rational.
That's really, I'm for that. Right.
Yeah. I was like, oh, you kind of have thought it through a lot more than I have. You know what I mean? So anyway, what do you think about my take? Is it going to be whoever wants to?
Yeah, because here's it all favors Trump, if for no other reason is that Biden was elected to say, I'm going to bring the boiling temperature down, and I'm going to restore norms. And we've got multiple foreign wars. We've got campus. We've got unrest that we haven't seen since the early 70s, late 60s. It came out, the Brennan Project or the Marshall Project, talked about how many major cities, how, like, in terms of crime statistics, half the cities don't report their crime statistics anymore.
Totally.
And, crime is falling. Yeah. And so when you've got and inflation, and when you've got all this chaos, if the guy who said I would fix it doesn't fix it, your next thing is, all right, then blow it all up.
Right.
And I think that benefits Trump.
For sure. I mean, I do try to, like, if we don't agree to at least follow statistics a little bit, then there's no medium by which we can have a discussion. So, like, if somebody says crime is worse than it's ever been, then I'm like, okay, well, let's look at the crime statistics, right? But those can be easily manipulated. Even in my own experiences in LA and in Texas, I've spoken with the police about issues to file a report, and they're like, you don't want to file a report. That's even at the patrolman level, they're limiting they don't want to report crimes. Not to mention when it rises, they'll adjust crime from a violent crime to a non-violent crime. It's like, well, did you see a knife? Or, you know what I mean? So it's like 100%. The statistics are flawed, but we do need something as a medium of agreement of what we're talking about, right? So that's where it's like a catch-22, but you're 100% right. People aren't stupid. They're seeing crime go up. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm witnessing it,
Yeah.
All right. So Trump is, this is an environment that favors Trump. Okay. All right. Well, I would say the last thing I say is right now, Virginia congressional primary contest is up. It closes on June 17th. There's some interesting stuff happening in Virginia that will be a precursor. We'll see which way that might go in the presidential. So, all right, my friend, I'll see you in a week.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one. That's it.